Now, a lot of you guys give me these pharmaceutical companies and ask me to look into them, and I look and it's like the company's developing a drug that affects 0.0000001% of the global population, or it cures albinism in pygmies. Like, the use cases are important and I'm not diminishing that, but the profitability likelihood of the company is non-existent. I am doing a pharmaceutical video here, but this is completely relevant and probably very profitable. Let's talk about AcelRX and acute pain management. Hey everybody, Walrus here from Walrus Street. Bringing you a deep dive today, a little due diligence, a little DD into AcelRX, ticker ACRX. This is a pharmaceutical company. The company already has FDA and CE approval for its Sufentanil product, DSUVIA. It also has CE approval for ZALVISO, which is another one of its Sufentanil products. It's completed phase 3 trials for ZALVISO in the United States, and it's putting together the application now for FDA approval. Before I get started, there have been a couple of other videos that have been made about this issue in the last week. I do want to give credit to JT Wealth and Invest with Ravi for covering ACRX. And if you're looking more at the technical side of things, check out Clay Trader, Satyajit Dasgupta, Tactical Traders, and Student Trader. All four of them have covered the technicals and trading and the charts on their channels. Of course, there is no DD like a Walrus DD. And I'm going to be going much deeper than the others have on their video, talking about the use case for this. I'm going to go more into the financials than I usually do. So let's get started. Other than abortion in America, probably the most talked about medical issue is the opioid epidemic. And there's this stigma that the opioid epidemic is propagated by junkies shooting up in the streets. And while that is true for a percent, many of the people who become addicted to opioids do so through prescription opioids. And this is something that doctors and pharmacists and drug companies and the US FDA have been concerned about for a really long time. The number of drug overdose deaths decreased by 4% from 2017 to 2018, but the number of overdose deaths was still 4 times higher in 2018 than 1999. So there was a short-term pullback. Nearly 70% of those deaths involved an opioid. 70% of the OD deaths involve opioids. The street drug involved death rates decreased by 4%, but synthetic opioid involved death rates increased by 10%. We can actually see the 3 waves of the rise in opioid deaths. In the last 7 years, there's been a sharp increase in deaths coming from synthetic opioids like tramadol and fentanyl. Now that's all well and good, but the callous truth about economics is that deaths don't always change policy, money changes policy. Here's the financial impact of the opioid epidemic on the US healthcare system. $11.3 billion in annual expenses for overdose-related costs, $1.94 billion in total annual hospital costs, 24% of opioid overdose patients were readmitted for additional emergency care within 30 days of discharge. That's the type of thing that gets people's attention. What is an opioid? Opioid drugs bind to opioid receptors in the brain, spinal cord, and other areas of the body. They tell your brain you're not in pain. Opioids are just painkillers, and they trick your brain, your nervous system, into thinking that you're not actually feeling pain. They're used to treat moderate to severe pain that may not respond well to other pain medications. Some common opioids include codeine. Hey, I'm allergic to that. Fentanyl, hydrocodone, acetaminophen, hydromorphone, methadone, morphine, oxycodone, blah, blah, blah. Your doctor can prescribe most of these drugs to take orally. Fentanyl is available in a patch. Also, in a hospital setting, most of these drugs are administered through an IV. It's important to note that naloxone, or Narcan, is kind of like the antidote to opioid overdose, and it can block the effect of opioids. One of the things that opioids do, they act as like a respiratory system depressant, and they slow down your breathing. Narcan reverses that, and it's kind of a respiratory stimulant, and it helps somebody breathe that's been in respiratory distress. This has become such an issue in the United States that in 2017, the FDA created an opioid policy steering committee. The top goal of the steering committee is decreasing exposure and preventing new addiction. Also, it's meant to foster the development of novel pain treatment therapies. Important to remember both both of these. President Biden. This is from his policy website from his election. He has an entire page devoted to the opioid crisis, and this is significant. He goes into detail. It's not really that important for me to go into the detail now because this was just a proposal on an election website, but the general points are probably going to hold true. He wants to hold accountable big pharmaceutical companies, executives, and others responsible for their role in triggering the opioid crisis. And he wants to stop overprescribing while improving access to effective and necessary pain management. And he wants to stem the flow of illicit drugs like fentanyl and into the United States, especially from China and Mexico. AcelRX's DSUVIA uses Sufentanil, which is not exactly the same as fentanyl. This is Sufentanil, sold under the brand names DSUVIA and Sufenta. DSUVIA is the product from AcelRX. It's a synthetic opioid analgesic drug, approximately 5 to 10 times as potent as fentanyl and 500 times as potent as morphine. Very strong. Have to be very careful with it. Now, because of the strength, there are fears of overdose being a reality. By the way, analgesic is another word for a painkiller in a medical setting. For the side effects, the drug causes significant respiratory depression and may cause respiratory arrest if given too rapidly or in too high a dosage. This if, right here, this if statement, this is what makes DSUVIA special from AcelRX, if given too rapidly or too high a dose. AcelRX has developed a way to deliver Sufentanil sublingually. This is going to be below the tongue. They use a bioadhesive tablet in an applicator, and the tablet sticks to the tissue below the tongue. It has high lipophilicity, and it limits the salivary response, which decreases the amount of the drug that people swallow. This drug is absorbed quickly into the body, and it works on achieving plasma-brain equilibrium. I'm going to go back to this and pause. Morphine takes about 168 minutes to achieve this equilibration. Hydromorphone takes 46 minutes. Sufentanil does this in 6.2 minutes. It offers faster and more complete pain relief. It meets the following unmet needs in opioid analgesia: non-invasive administration, because it's just sublingual, rapid brain equilibration, no active metabolites, and less frequent redosing. Once you dose one time with Sufentanil, you don't have to keep doing it like you do with morphine or other opioids. So now that we get the idea, the lay of the land, what the product is in general, let's look at my 4 questions before I invest into a company. Who's in charge? What's the product? What are the financials? Who else is involved? Number 1, who's in charge? This is their senior management. They actually have a really young management team. Vincent Angotti is the CEO. Pam Palmer is the chief medical officer. Rafiaz Dorian, chief financial officer. And Badri Dasu is the chief engineering officer. They all do have some experience, but because of their age, as you can imagine, they don't have a whole lot of experience. I think Miss Palmer's experience is most relevant. She's the co-founder of the company. She received a medical degree and a doctorate in neuroscience from Stanford, did an anesthesia residency at UC San Francisco, and she's board certified in anesthesiology and pain medicine management. Even though this is a younger management team, they're incredibly disciplined with their spending. Now, this is an article back from March. AcelRX buys Tetraphase Pharma for $14.4 million. Tetraphase had developed a anti-infection drug called Xerava for intra-abdominal infections that would partner well with DSUVIA. For $14.4 million, AcelRX was going to buy them. This was a couple months later. There was a revised merger, and instead of $14.4 million, the price was raised to $30 million and an additional $14.5 million in CVRs. This was a massive increase. Just a couple days later, you could see AcelRX Pharmaceuticals announced it's not going to continue to pursue Tetraphase. Tetraphase got a higher buyout option from another company. They had already been negotiating for months with AcelRX, reached an agreement. AcelRX wasn't willing to increase their offer even more. So this is something that they pursued for months. They wanted this deal, but they still had the discipline to say, enough's enough. We're not going to push this even further. And I respect this so much from a young management team. It's easy to take that agreement and say, we're going to go ahead, buy out this company. We're going to add another FDA approved drug. We're going to grow even faster. But instead, they looked at the financial responsibility and the efficacy and the potential reward of the merger and decided not to do it. Now, when we talk about who's in charge at AcelRX, it's important to talk about the business part partnerships too. Just like with Sensonics, we talk about Essentia, we have to talk about the companies that are going to be working with AcelRX to help market their product. The biggest one is going to be Zimmer Biomet. AcelRX's product DSUVIA can be used in any clinical setting. It doesn't have to be just in emergency rooms. It could be in dental clinics, plastic surgery clinics, anywhere where there's a minor surgery and acute pain. Zimmer Biomet is a massive company that has a market cap of over $30 billion. They sell these kits to dentists for dental implants for dental surgery. The kits arrive in boxes, they have all of the parts that are needed, and you can see how by partnering with AcelRX, they'll be able to put the little plunger and application system for the sublingual Sufentanil DSUVIA in with the boxes of their kits. It's kind of a perfect fit. Really ingenious. AcelRX and DSUVIA have several investigator-initiated studies that have popped up over the last year. This is from March 6, 2020, Brigham and Women's Hospital for an investigator-initiated study led by Richard Ehrman, MD, MBA, Associate Professor of Anesthesia, Co-Director of the Center for Perioperative Research at Brigham and Women's Hospital, and Harvard Medical School. Oh, no big deal, just Harvard. So this is going to be for a study in patients undergoing spine surgery. This is another one for orthopedic patients in perioperative setting, and this is going to be with the Cleveland Clinic, and this is from August 24th, 2020. Here's one that's just from January 19th, 2021. Another investigator-initiated study in cardiac surgery enhanced recovery regimen. This is with University Hospitals in the Cleveland Medical Center, Dr. Asher. These investigator-initiated studies are incredibly well-reputed, well-regarded in the academic community because this isn't AcelRX reaching out to these investigators, these professors, these doctors, and saying, hey, can you put together a study for us using our product? This is the opposite. This is the professors, the doctors coming to AcelRX and saying, we like your product. We would like to run a study on it to test its efficacy in blah. So this is kind of like free marketing, free advertising for the company, for its partnerships. This is from September 14th, 2020. AcelRX announces DSUVIA added to the US DoD's Joint Deployment Formulary. The JDF is a core list of pharmaceutical products that are designated for deploying military units across all service branches. The keyword here is all service branches of the US military. A week later, DSUVIA contract award for up to $3.6 million from the US Army. Contract award in addition to expected purchases for assemblages, sets, kits, and outfits. I'll show you guys later, but this expected purchases is actually in excess of $30 million on top of this $3.6 million. This is a massive contract for such a small company. But that's just the Army, and the DoD approved it for all service branches. So if you look at just the raw numbers, this is the active and reserve US military force personnel by service branch and reserve component. Now I realize this is personnel, but you can kind of get an idea by the number of personnel how many kits would be needed because it's proportionate. So here's the Army, that's got the most personnel, Army National Guard, but then we've got Navy, Air Force, Reserve, Marine Corps, Coast Guard at the bottom. If you add all these numbers up, Army is less than 40%. There's potential here for more DoD contracts, giving this company tens of millions of more dollars. Question 2, what's the product? They have DSUVIA in the US, DSUVIO in the EU, ZALVISO in the US, ZALVISO in the EU. Now it's important to note that they are generating revenue already from DSUVIA sales in both the US and the EU and ZALVISO sales in Europe. They do not have approval for ZALVISO in the US yet. The difference between them, DSUVIA is a sublingual tablet and the size is 30 micrograms and it has to be administered by a medical professional. ZALVISO is a PCA. It's a patient-controlled analgesic that the patient can give to themselves. And the way that ZALVISO is designed, it's got an applicator and the patient can put their own sublingual tablet in. This is the DSUVIA website. I like their little catchphrase here, effective pain relief efficiently delivered. If you remember, the negatives for Sufentanil are that it can cause respiratory depression and arrest if given too rapidly or too high of a dosage. Because the applicator is a single dose applicator, you could see the little tiny tablet in the tip here. You don't have to worry about administering too high of a dosage. And because the tablet is administered sublingually and it just passes through the mucous membrane in the mouth, the speed of dosing is controlled and consistent. I don't want to be insensitive here. I understand the opioid epidemic has affected a lot of people negatively. And for DSUVIA's approval, there was a lot of lashback against the FDA. So much so that Commissioner Scott Gottlieb actually issued a very lengthy statement on why he felt the FDA needed to release DSUVIA. Here he talks about how the potential uses on the battlefield and how the DoD DoD worked closely with the sponsor on the development of this new medicine, the sponsor being AcelRX. This opioid formulation, along with the unique delivery device, was a priority medical product for the Pentagon because it fills a specific and important but limited unmet medical need in treating our nation's soldiers on the battlefield. The involvement and needs of the DoD in treating soldiers on the battlefield were discussed by the advisory committee. This kind of makes sense why the DoD is backing this development of this product. If you have a soldier injured on the battlefield, sometimes an IV is impossible to administer or unsafe because the risk of infection is too high, and the DSUVIA system can be just placed sublingually, so there's not even a need for the injured soldier to swallow it in case there's an abdominal issue. They mention here that the additional opioid drug needs to benefit public health. It needs to address concerns about risks of diversion, accidental overdose, abuse, and misuse. And they go on to saying that DSUVIA meets all of these needs because of the applicator. Also, because DSUVIA is only in a 30 microgram tablet, the amount of dosage of the opioid is much less than if you were going to comparably treat a patient with hydrocodone or morphine. Now, this is their other product. Since we just talked about DSUVIA, this is the ZALVISO. This is the PCA, patient-controlled analgesic. And this one is kind of funny. So the FDA has been like pushing back on approval for DSUVIA, and they've been pushing back even harder on ZALVISO, even though it's already been approved in Europe. And you can see that they've forced AcelRX to complete 1, 2, 3, 4 studies already up through phase 3 for ZALVISO. And each time you could look on their website, ZALVISO came out in flying colors, passed the test that the FDA demanded. So really, the idea here is that the FDA is just hesitant to approve ZALVISO because of the backlash from the opioid epidemic. AcelRX is just kind of waiting for a green light to submit the official application. This is AcelRX Pharmaceuticals announces publication of clinical data on decreased postoperative opioid requirements and enhanced post-anesthesia recovery following perioperative use of DSUVIA. This right here, this enhanced post-anesthesia recovery following perioperative use, this is a really big deal. PACU, that's post-anesthesia care unit, time to discharge, recovery time in the PACU was reduced by an average of 14 minutes across patients in the SST group, that's the sublingual Sufentanil test group, compared with the control group. Respiratory depression, 3 patients in the control group required naloxone, Narcan, for respiratory depression, whereas no patients in the SST group required naloxone use. Getting patients out of the PACU quickly is really important post-surgery because this is where you're waiting to see if the patient is going to have any respiratory distress issues from coming out of the anesthesia. And the PACU is where a lot of complications can potentially emerge following a surgery. But this study indicates that patients recover more quickly in the PACU after using DSUVIA. This is their January Pharmaceuticals overview. You could find this PDF on their investor page of their website. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but something here, and this is important, and this is why I'm comfortable investing in this. DSUVIA provides a clear unmet need in acute pain management. It's both rapid and non-invasive. You could see rapid and invasive would be injections, IV fentanyl, IV hydromorphone, morphine. This is oliceridine injection. This was an FDA approval from last autumn. Down here, we've got invasive and slow. These are different injections. We've got non-invasive and slow, Percocet, Vicodin. These are going to be your oral tablets that you're going to consume. It helps providers address unmet needs. It improves the patient experience, higher ease of use for healthcare providers, higher efficiency with the PACU time being reduced, no risk of IV infection. On that same line, there's no risk of IV dosage errors, which do happen not an insignificant percent of the time, and it lowers the total cost. Opioids are the second most frequent drug class of medication errors within acute hospital settings. It's impossible to incorrectly dose DSUVIA since it's just a single dose applicator. It's fast acting to blood-brain equilibration, 6 minutes compared to slower acting ones like IV morphine. This shows the Sufentanil sublingual, and it shows it's longer lasting with a longer time spent above the threshold for analgesia. So this is the threshold where the patient doesn't experience pain. For morphine, we have these spikes in plasma on the dosage. The spikes require a readministration. This is a dose and a dose. It takes 2 doses to reach that threshold for analgesia. It takes 2 spikes to reach that same dosage for the analgesic threshold. And you could see even the IV Sufentanil doesn't work as quickly as the sublingual Sufentanil. So if you're wondering, why don't they just put it through an IV? Because it's actually faster going in sublingually and it lasts longer. The side effects are not terribly much higher than the placebo. You would expect them to be higher, but they're actually not terribly much higher than the placebo. The most common side effects being nausea and headache, which if you've ever been under anesthesia, yeah, nausea and headache. Also here, cognitive impairment assessment demonstrates 97% of patients had no cognitive impairment. This is one of the things that doctors are looking for before releasing patients from the PACU. Is the patient cognitively aware? Are they responsive? And now, from a business standpoint, let's take a look at the economics. This is a pharmacoeconomic analysis of published study results. Yes, fentanyl is way cheaper. Fentanyl is dirt cheap. Intraoperative, postoperative, $3, right? IV acetaminophen, IV epinephrine. The PACU time is what's costly though. Because this PACU time is reduced with DSUVIA, it ends up leading to massive cost saving. This is the PACU time if extra time is needed. Here we could see kind of a use case, 91.9 million adult moderate to severe acute pain visits in medically supervised settings, emergency departments, outpatient surgery, inpatient, other procedures. And they're increasingly performed in ambulatory surgery centers and procedural suites. These include cosmetic surgery, burn and wound care, oral surgery, and other painful procedures. This is kind of important because DSUVIA doesn't really need an anesthesiologist. I'm sorry to all my anesthesiology friends, but DSUVIA can be administered by a dentist. It could be administered by a proceduralist in a clinical setting because there's no need for the IV setup and the monitoring, the IV volume, and the levels of the patient. Question number 3, what are their financials? You could see they're trading at about $1.91 a share. Market cap is $189.684 million. Earnings, they had beat, miss, mixed earnings. Analysts are projecting them as a buy on Yahoo. And the price targets, average during the next 12 months is $5.46, high is $9. There's a pretty strong consensus here that this price is going to at least go 2.5x in the next 12 months and at most go over 4 times. This is their third quarter earnings call. They have 4 pillars here. Department of Defense, they've achieved that. Commercial partnership, they've started achieving that with Zimmer. Hospital penetration, this is going to be facilitated by the investigator-initiated studies. Product acquisition and licensing, they still have to work on that. This military contract is pretty big deal. This was not factored into their quarter 3 earnings report, so this is going to be a nice surprise on the fourth quarter earnings report. Now, it's forecasted for them to have 30 million in initial stocking orders over 3 years, expected to begin quarter 4 2020. 3.6 million 4-year contract awarded in 2020 for the comparative study. We don't know how that 30 million is going to be split over the next 3 years. We know if we just do some simple math, 10 million a year, that's about 2.5 million a quarter. You could see for their quarter 3 financials, they had 1.4 million in revenue, 8.6 million in operating expenses. This doesn't include the military contract, 43 million in cash and short-term investments. So financially, this company is doing just fine. This is their earnings call for the third quarter. In quarter 3, 73% of their commercial customers were reordering. More than 90% of the doses shipped were reorders as well. Both metrics indicate growing comfort with DSUVIA's use, and September was our highest end user demand amongst the to-date orders. They have a partnership with La Jolla Pharmaceuticals for a co-promotion agreement. Also, they're expecting their fourth quarter cash operating expenses to remain in the $7.5 to $8 million range. So if the operating expenses go down and the military contract starts to be factored into fourth quarter, we might actually be really close, within a couple million of the revenue, completely negating the expenses. Plus the company has cash on hand and short-term investments. Down here in the question answer session, and she was talking about why DSUVIA is appealing for clinics. We've seen over the last 20 years, there's been a huge shift from hospital-based operation to ASC. So we know total hips, total knees, spine, surgeries, etc. are being done in ASCs. ASC is an acronym for Ambulatory Surgical Center. The more minor procedures that were occurring in the ASCs are now being pushed into procedural suites. These are like your clinics with sterile fields, and this would be like a dermatology clinic, a plastic surgery clinic, a dental clinic. They can be safely done there, and it's much less expensive. So if they only have to pay as a patient for the surgery and not for the surgical center and an anesthesiologist, they would rather have their procedures done in a plastic surgeon's office. It's one physician, and adoption there is occurring much more rapidly. Similarly, ENT surgeons have minor procedures. They're starting to do more and more in their own office, and these surgeons get paid more money when they do it in their office versus when they're doing it in ASC. This is where DSUVIA comes into play because they find pain management a challenge. So we can see right now, adoption is increasing. DSUVIA has a problem with packaging right now, and their packaging and their manufacturing process is too expensive. But by first quarter 2022, they're going to have a 60% reduction in their unit cost price because of streamlining. That means by first quarter next year, they're going to become profitable because they're expecting their operating expenses will remain about the same. And we know the military contracts kicking in, sales are going to be kicking up, the publication of these investigator-initiated studies. We've got the possibility that the FDA approval for ZALVISO comes in. I'm not hopeful on that, but it's possible that that ends up driving sales. A 60% reduction in their unit cost manufacturing. At the beginning of January, we had a little bit of a run up here from about $1.40 to $2.20, and it ended up going up to $2.90 before coming back down. And that's because the company announced a direct offering to raise some cash with the elevated share price. But on Friday, it dropped down to $1.80 and then came back to $1.90. So there is some strong support, some buying pressure for this stock. Now, this was their public offering for their common stock. They ended up pricing about 27.5 million. Their shares outstanding and their float, it's not so bad. They've got 90 million shares outstanding, 88 float. Insider ownership's about 2%, which is respectable. This spike happened because of a release of an article. These two penny stocks could surge over 300%, said analysts. This analyst right here from Cantor, Brandon Volks, actually ended up saying it's a $9 price target with a 552% upside potential in the next 12 months. A lot of the analysts here, like even the low projections, are setting it at $5, average is 7, high is 9. That's in the next 12 months. So this is going to be like one of those stocks that goes up in multiples. Question 4, who else is involved? Of course, we got to take a look at the investors. 2% held by insiders, 27% by institutions, BlackRock, Vanguard, Geode, State Street, Morgan Stanley, big names. Let's go ahead and take a look at Robinhood, and I'm going to show you exactly how I'm going to be playing this. Okay, you guys can see the portfolio here. The way I'm going to be playing this, I'm just going to be buying shares, and I'm going to be setting in about 1,000 shares here. And just remember, always make sure you hit a limit order. So I'm going to go ahead and put it at the market price, but I want to protect myself from spikes. We're going to go ahead and do 1,000 shares. Swipe up to trade. There we go. As you can see, I am quite confident in this company and in the DSUVIA product. I think AcelRX, for a small pharmaceutical company, has an incredibly healthy balance sheet. I think their revenue is going to be surpassing their expenses by first quarter next year for sure, if not a little bit beforehand, depending on sales. I think as these academic studies get rolled out, adoption is going to increase. Typically, hospitals are a little slow, doctors are a little slow to adopt new pharmaceuticals, but once everybody sees the benefits in the lack of cognitive impairment, the decreased chances of respiratory depression, and especially the reduced PACU time, hospital administrators are going to be pushing for the doctors to use DSUVIA for the cost saving on the reduced PACU time alone. Of course, there are risks. The FDA could take a stronger stance in regulating opioids, but because of the differences that set DSUVIA aside from morphine, hydrocodone, the other IV-based drugs, as well as the potential risks of pill bottles of hydrocodone and Vicodin, I think that DSUVIA's single-use applicator is more safe. It's easier to control the distribution and dissemination. I don't think it poses as much of a risk in the opioid market. This is a case where I feel the benefits far outweigh the risks of the company, and I'm willing to hold this company for about 1.5 years to see what happens. I'm expecting gains throughout the year in line with the analysts' opinions. Based on my own research, I think the high-end analyst projections are more likely to come true because I think adoption is going to happen very quickly. So there you have it. Hope you guys enjoyed. That was an interesting look at a pharmaceutical. As always, if you did, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you turn on notifications to be alerted as soon as my videos go live. If you're new to investing, please check out my Robinhood and my Webull account links below the video. There are referral links, and if you use them to sign up, you get some free stock, I get some free stock, everybody wins. Also, recently I've been added into the Webull Influencer Partner Program, so my rewards, if anybody uses my link, are much more significant, and I would appreciate that. As always, guys, thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate interacting with you in the comments section. I'll see you next time.